Hi, welcome to our OWL for today. We're going to get started. Today's topic and this month's topic for our online workshop for learning is on 10 tips for engaging parents. So we're going to go ahead and cover this topic today during our session. I want to welcome everybody for being on our OWL today. We're going to wait just a minute to make sure that everybody else logs in. While we wait, if you will make sure to please raise your hand virtually by clicking on the round button at the top right-hand side. It has a little hand symbol. That way I can see that you can hear me okay. Okay, so I see those hands being raised. Thank you. So let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, this month's topic is an online workshop for learning, OWL, is of parent engagement. So this is a big topic. It's one that I've been wanting to focus some attention on for quite a bit. And we're going to frame that in terms of 10 tips that you can do in your troop to engage parents. My name is Monica Hasso. My information is on the screen that you see in front of you. So if ever you want to reach out to me or have any questions, don't hesitate to do so. And thank you again for owling with us. We do an owl every month on a different topic. It's just a way to enrich the volunteer experience for everybody, no matter where you are. Everybody's encouraged to take them, parents, volunteers, leaders. We also are recording this and we will store it on our council YouTube account so that you can access it at any time. Normally, our owls will go about 20-30 minutes. This particular topic this month is such a hefty one that it will go a little longer. So I promise I'll do my best to be brief. What we're going to cover today is a couple of things. So first, we're going to ask the question of why are we wanting to engage parents? So for the remainder of our session, when we talk about engaging parents, we want to assume that we mean, of course, positive parent engagement. There is such a thing as negative parent engagement, but that's a whole other topic for another day. Engaging parents is a pretty big discussion among schools or really any organization that deals with youth. Today, though, we're going to focus specifically on engaging parents of Girl Scouts in your troop. And when we say parents, it could be any guardian. So here's what we're going to go over. We're going to answer the question, why engage parents? We're going to go over these 10 tips for engaging parents. They're not in any order, and it's definitely not a comprehensive list. They're not in priority. Some of these you, I'm sure, do already. Our goal is to continue the conversation and perhaps give you just a couple more tips that you can try with your troop. We may have time for some scenarios, we may not. We'll see how we do. And then we're going to end with, of course, some time for questions, answers, and perhaps some sharing. So how do we motivate our families to become active supporters of our troops instead of passive bystanders? How do we engage parents in our Girl Scout mission? That's really what we're going to go over today. I'm glad that you asked. So encouraging parents is all about building relationships of trust. So why do we want to do that? As you can see here on the screen with my volunteer, picture of my volunteer, I suspect that most of you are listening today, or that are listening today, joined Girl Scouts because of your love for either your daughter or another girl, or perhaps your past history in Girl Scouting. So you want to provide her with as much opportunity as possible so that she gains the courage, the confidence, and the character from her Girl Scout experience. You also want to do the same for her friends. We know that, and we love you for that. We really do value our volunteers, and so we want to keep you healthy and help with the stress free. We'd like for you to be around for a while, of course. To be honest, we know, we got to face it, managing a Girl Scout troop can be a lot of work for the leader. Organizing materials, running meetings, providing activity information for parents, finances, distributing resources, cookies, All of that takes time and effort, we know. And you're human. You've got a life, you have a family, and quite frankly, one person cannot do all of that. So what we want to do is go from this to that. So we know that leaders have reported a lack of parent support as a big reason for quitting, and we definitely don't want that. Leaders enjoy working with and being with girls. They simply need more support to avoid the dreaded burnout, as it's called. A Girl Scout troop leader cannot and should not have to stand alone. We care about you. We don't want you to burn out. So we want to share some aspects of building parental engagement because a strong family troop network will help the troop and the girls overall. So with that said, we also know, I like this quote here because it kind of speaks to what I'm talking about now. Um, we ask how we motivate families to become active supporters of our troops instead of passive bystanders. That's what we're asking. And as much as I hate to break it to all of us, unfortunately, there is no secret trick, no magic wand, no formula that we can go over today that will make everything great and all your parents engaged. What we're going to be talking about and how parental engagement really comes about has to do all about relationships. And with relationships, you're building trust and it's going to take patience. That is what you'll hear me talk about a lot today. As with most things in life that are worthwhile, engaging parents is about building relationships with them. It's important throughout that relationship to instill and develop a level of trust. It takes some time, just like any relationship. And so we want to be patient with ourselves. All the tips that we're going to go over in this session today are geared to help you build those relationships and cultivate trust with your parents. Some of it's going to be very common sense. Some of it is not going to be. So hopefully you can leave here with a couple of suggestions and tips that you can try. Engage, no matter how dedicated and hardworking a leader is, he or she must have parent support in order to be successful. That we know. Some people may be asking, well, why are you talking about family? Why engage parents? Isn't this supposed to be a girl-led organization? And of course, that's true. But those girls come attached to families, and the level of support and commitment that the family is willing to give can make or break your daughter's Girl Scout experience, not to mention the experience of the leader. So as we move along, please keep in mind that parental engagement is not linear. It's an ongoing process. There is no point where we're going to say, okay, we're done. Parents are all engaged. That's never going to happen. It's a continual process. Also, every troop is different. So the troop dynamics of its parents are going to be distinct also. What may work for some may not work for others. So it's up to you, the leadership of the troop, to figure that out through a lot of trial and error. Parental or engaged troop parents is our goal. If we do that, we will have happy girls, happy leaders, and also happy parents. So I want to point out that there's also many levels of engagement. Maybe you want to have your parents help you with more of the troop duties and tasks, like buying supplies or putting together crafts or securing speakers or organizing trips. That's great. We can help you hopefully get some of your parents to help with that. Maybe you already have that in your troop and you want your parents to be just more receptive and responsive to the troop communication. That's really for you to determine. You know your troop, but either way, what we'll go over today should help with those. So let's go ahead and get started with our list of 10 tips to engage your parents. So we're going to start at number one, and number one is starting with a great beginning. And the one thing I'm going to focus on regarding that is in this slide. I want to first say that when a Girl Scout troop year officially starts October 1st, it kind of follows the school year. That does not mean that your troop cannot start anytime. It's never really a bad time to start a troop. So it's never a bad time to have your parent meeting. We recommend that you have a parent meeting at the beginning of your year, Girl Scout year, whenever time that is. You also want to have one before you participate in product sales, and then it's good to also have one at the end of the year. I cannot stress how important your parent or guardian meeting is to starting your troop off well and engaging your parents. So here are some things that you're going to be able to do in your parent meeting. And this is a topic that we could really talk about for the whole hour. So I'm going to try and keep it brief. Keep in mind that the way you talk to parents is also a huge part of all of this, but we'll go over that a little more when we talk about communication. So one of the things you'll get to do during your parent meeting is quite simply get to know the families. Again, later on I'll go over some tips on communicating with them, but this is your time to really get to know them, introduce yourself. Maybe you could have a volunteer oversee an activity with the girls so you can have the parents' undivided attention, that you may consider doing something like that. But this is your time to get to know the families and the girls. During your parent meeting, you'll also be able to complete paperwork that you need, and we all know that we have paperwork to do, membership forms, health history forms, so that should not be new to us. Late in the next slide, I'm going to mention two handouts that may help you with engaging parents in your troop. They're not required, so I'll go over those here in the next slide. But this is your opportunity to perhaps have packets ready for your parents that they can complete and do before the meeting's over. You also have an opportunity during your parent meeting to get help from them. This is when you begin to ask for their participation. Expect them to help with the troop. We will talk about this also more later when we talk about how to ask. Another thing that you'll do with your parent meeting is pass on information to them. It's a great avenue to do so. This will this is something that'll be very vital to your troop, passing that information along in the meeting face to face. It does also very much help if we assume that all of our parents have no background or very little background in Girl Scouting. If we assume that, then they won't know unless we tell them. So you want to put important stuff in writing, such as a welcome letter, which I'll show you an example of here in just a little bit. For example, it's good to let your parents know that you, the leaders, are volunteers. You'd be surprised how many people do not know that, but they won't know unless we tell them. If you have a parent that lets you know that they do have experience in Girl Scouting, though, you want to use that as a resource. Include them and help them help you pass out information, have them talk about their experience. So one thing you'll do in the meetings is pass out information. Another thing is set the troop tone. This is your first opportunity to show not just the girls, but parents, what type of troop the girls choose to be. Are they going to be into crafts, the outdoors? Do they really like animals? Are they older girls and are maybe into college preparation or traveling? So you can kind of set that tone in your first parent meeting and show the parents that. One of the big things that you do in your parent meeting is set clear expectations. This is very vital. Again, we're assuming parents won't know much. They definitely won't know what their role is in the troop unless we inform them. So what happens, for example, if nobody in the troop turns in the paperwork that they need? Or if their daughter doesn't show up to meetings, what are they going to miss out on? So those are all things that you can be very clear at in setting those expectations. And I'll show you a handout where you can communicate that here in the next slide. You also will explain the role that the girl, the leader, and the parent play in the troop. A big part of a troop is, of course, what responsibilities do each of those have? What can you expect from me as your leader? What would the girls be responsible for? And parents, what is your part? Everybody has a role and responsibilities. So it's good to explain those to them also. And your parent meeting will also welcome them. So it's going to be inviting. You want them to feel welcome. It would be really hard to get parents or anyone engaged if they don't feel welcome, right? It's easier said than done, of course. This is because having a welcoming culture is not one thing you could do. It comes from a lot of little actions working together. There's again no magic. There's not one thing. What may be welcoming to some may also not be welcoming to others. But there are definitely some things that we can do that are welcoming. For example, simple eye contact, handshaking, smiling, listening, those types of things. And then of course you want to make your parent meeting fun. Try not to make it just another stuffy meeting. Include the girls if possible. Have snacks available, maybe a simple craft. Music will help with that also. So as I go over this list with you all right now, I realize that this topic could really be a whole OWL session on its own. There's so much more information and details that I would love to share with you, but because we're going to keep it brief, I'm going to keep moving on. Earlier, I said that the wording you use with parents is very important. So I have an example that you're going to see throughout the presentation today. It's how you phrase the troop experience, and by using the words something like the troop belongs to the girls, we as adults, leaders and parents, are here to help them. That changes the dynamic completely from, hi parents, would you help me, the leader? No, they're not helping you, the leader, they're helping the troop, they're girls. So that wording is very powerful. All right, here are some handouts that I mentioned I wanted to show you. Again, these are not required. They're completely optional. You may already have something like this for your troop. If you would like a copy or an electronic version, just reach out to me. The first one is what we call a welcome letter. So you can see an example here of another troop in another council, and it's a very welcoming, fun, colorful welcome letter. Not so much information. We don't want to overwhelm them. Simple information like the meeting times and the website. So that's something you could think about doing for your troop, and you would have that available anytime a new parent would join you. So it's not something you'd have to do every time. Another handout is called a behavior contract. I'd like to change that to agreement, but it's because it really is just an agreement. What are the girls going to agree to do as part of the troop? What are the parents going to agree to do? And what are the leaders going to agree to do? So it sets those expectations again so that everybody's clear on that. And when you have clear expectations, things just go a lot smoother. Okay, so those are some useful handouts that I wanted to mention. We don't talk about these enough, but they can be very useful to your troop. Moving along to tip number 2 to engaging your parents in the troop, and that is finding common ground. It will definitely help to recognize that all parents, regardless of where they come from, of income, of education, of cultural background, all want to be involved in their daughter's experience. Otherwise, they would not be part of the troop. All parents want to be involved in some way. Even parents who are okay with just dropping off and picking up their girls are involved because they see the value of their daughter being in that troop. That is our common ground with them. So we do have some part in helping parents understand the value of Girl Scouting. Again, assume parents do not know much, if anything, about scouting, how will their girl benefit? What values will she learn? What skills will be applied? How will she become a leader? This is all easy to tie back to the Girl Scout promise and law. And parents knowing that really helps in getting them engaged. We want to instill an overall philosophy of partnership with the parents. It's no longer parents doing things for the leader. It's parents helping the girls, helping the troop by your side. So we're partnering with them. I have a quote here. Well, here's the saying I mentioned earlier that's very powerful in phrasing messaging to your parents. Words are really important. When we see common ground with parents, then we're all working in the best interest of the girls. We're kind of like on the same side, so to speak, which is where we want to be. All right, so tip number 3 for engaging parents in your troop is quite simply to include them. In most cases, parents understand the value that scouting provides and they want to help in a limited way, perhaps. Maybe they're super busy and they don't know how they fit in, what they can do, or they may not have the confidence or be ready to do it. It may be up to us to help them feel comfortable in this new setting. Remember earlier, I talked about patience being the key. You could have a parent who, for example, knows nothing about Girl Scouting, doesn't have the confidence to step up yet, but they are present whenever you ask them to, they pay attention. There is potential there. It just takes a little time and patience to develop that. So this is why including parents is important. Some ways that you can include them in the troop is by showing them what their girls have earned. Seeing what the girls accomplish is key for both the parents and the girls. Sometimes girls and families forget all the skills and activities and fun that they had, throughout the months. So including parents in ceremonies like a court of awards or an investiture, or having them pin their own daughter in front of the group is a great way to do this, especially because it's in a public setting in front of everybody else. There's a level or a sense of pride and belonging that is tied to that. Another way to include parents is in, of course, your troop activities. Start with small things like maybe they just can, handle bringing the snacks or supplies, and then build to bigger things from there. You may even add a little time at the end of a meeting where families are invited to see what the girls did during that meeting, kind of a show and tell. Your troop does awesome things, we know it, so it's up to us to show it off. Overall, you want to make parents part of the process. Have activities where parents are involved. Here is a quote from a parent or a fellow troop leader on this topic. She said, "My 6-year experience as a leader and service unit team member has taught me that parents do want to be involved and must personally be asked to be part of the troop. Remember that parents are not psychic. Personally ask what they are interested in and see if you can incorporate these interests into your troop's activities." So moving on to step number 4 for engaging parents in your troop is ask them for help. In most cases, parents understand the value that scouting provides, like we mentioned earlier. And notice that I have ask in quotations. That's because in many cases, we should be trying to set the tone and expectation that parents are to help early on in our parent meeting. It starts even before we physically ask them. So once and if we do have to make a formal ask for help from parents, here are some things to keep in mind. Go in with the expectation that parents will be helping. Again, I have ask in quotation marks. That's because we set that tone early, like I mentioned. So go in with the expectation that they can help in some way, little ways. Believe in your ask. In other words, don't be afraid to ask. Remember that we're not asking for us, we're asking for the benefit of the troop. I have found that many troop leaders, um, including myself when I was a volunteer, are not comfortable with asking for help because we're used to kind of doing it all. However, the reality is that if we want to be a successful troop and be here in the long term for the girls, and to be effective at developing them into leaders, we're going to need help. The less that we spend time with the little stuff, like snacks and crafts and paperwork, then the more time that we'll have to dedicate to that. So believe in what you're asking. We also want to offer specific options for parents. Studies show that the more you clearly define the ways parents can help, the more likely they are to help. All we have to do is offer them options or kind of a menu of what's available. You could have a document that you give to your parents at the parent meeting listing all the different things that they could help with in your troop. And that could be simple, like taking pictures, could be maybe securing guest speakers, it could be really anything. So you could have something like that that they would select. And if there's not anything on that list that appeals to them, they can suggest something on their own. You also want to watch your wording, like we mentioned earlier. Words are important. For example, I may not get somebody to be our troop treasurer if I ask them to take over this job and be in charge of the troop finances. But if I ask someone to keep track of how much money the troop has during the year, then that may give me a better result. Believe me, titles and words have an impact. You also want to make it personal. So when you're asking someone, I know that now in this technological age, we do a lot of email, we do a lot of social Facebook posting, but honestly, that will only go so far. Some things still have to be done face to face. Sometimes we still have to pick up the phone and call. This is why building those relationships early on really matter. It's a lot less awkward to make that phone call or personally ask someone for help if we've already built that relationship, as opposed to asking someone in person or calling someone that's really a stranger. So also don't be afraid to use the words help. Can I count on you? Our troop could really use your help. Those words are also very helpful. Remember that we're partners with the parents, so make it personal. Make your ask personal. You also may offer special invitations to some parents. Maybe you know that one of your parents is a professional photographer and you offer them a special invitation to come talk to the troop. Or maybe you know a parent that's really good at social media and you come and you ask them, you invite them to talk to the girls. Everybody likes to feel special, and a special invitation to a particular person could help with that. And then my last tip on asking for help is patience again. It takes time to develop those relationships of trust and for some to feel comfortable enough to step up. Although there's a very important quote out there based on statistics that says most people that don't volunteer is simply because they were not asked. So sometimes we ask and we may get a no. That's okay. They may not be ready yet, or maybe they want to do something else. For example, if a parent's an accountant for a living. They do that day in, day out for their job. They may not want to necessarily be the troop treasurer. They may want to do something completely different, maybe work with the girls directly. So don't lose hope. It takes time to develop that core set of parent helpers. Here's a couple of other quotes from leaders on this topic. So, for example, I put out a 4 year, this particular person puts out a 4 month calendar of meetings. They ask the family for help. It works for them. They figure out how many adults they need based on the adult to girl ratios. If there's not enough adults to help, then some events unfortunately may be canceled. But usually when girls are disappointed with that, it'll apply a little pressure on parents so that that does not happen again. This other leader says, don't assume that sending a letter asking for volunteers will work. Take time to make a phone call to personally ask for help. It's amazing how willing parents will be if your request is very specific rather than general. So, really good tips on asking for help. So, tip number 5 on helping engage your parents with the troop is to go beyond the troop. So what we mean by that is activities outside of regular troop meetings and outings allow parents to see a broader view of Girl Scouts, and many of these activities can also count towards badge or journey requirements. Many parents are unaware of these opportunities. So the more connected your parents are with Scouting and the organization overall, the more engaged they'll be within your troop. So a couple ways that you can help your parents go beyond the troop is to share opportunities outside the troop. So there's a lot of council, service unit, even community activities. Show parents how to visit our website to look at those. Not everything your troop does has to be done as a troop. Parents can register their daughter and participate with these service unit and council events on their own. They can do that. That's okay. Support parents through parent resources. So maybe have some resources your parents can look at, borrow, and use. I know of some service units and troops that may have a small resource library of used journeys, for example, that parents can, take a look at and use with their daughter. We want to encourage trainings also. So everybody is welcome to our trainings. There's not anybody that will be turned away. The more people are trained, the better. We also offer online trainings like our Girl Scouting 101, which is an orientation of Girl Scouts that comes from GSUSA. And then, of course, we offer these monthly OWL topics, right? On a different topic each month from different departments. So one thing that's not on here that I wanted to mention is we want to, through these efforts, support scouting from home. So there is a limited amount of time, we know. There's only so much you can do in your troop meetings. Some girls may want to do more badges than what we have time for. So that's where the parents can come in and help them do that at home. It's up to us, though, to let them know that and where they can go for those resources. All right, tip number 6 for helping engage parents in your troop is it's pretty obvious, but it's important enough to highlight, and that's develop a positive environment around the troop. Parents may never engage or disengage later if that environment is not positive, not welcoming. After all, how many of us would want to be part of such a group, right? So a couple things to do is again to make your environment welcoming. Many things go into creating this. Being open, friendly, helpful, that all helps. A couple of examples of what you don't want to be going on in your troop is cliquish behavior, no gossip. Maybe you have a sign up and it has, no gossip allowed here. You want to be fair and under no circumstances ever belittle anyone in front of anybody. Make sure that you and your leaders, co-leaders, volunteers are also positive, are also smiling. Those little things go a long way to making everybody feel welcome. Another thing you want to make sure and do to create a positive environment is to be transparent. Transparency goes a long way to developing a positive environment. Other than to protect the privacy of each and every Girl Scout, there should be no secrets in your troop. It's okay to share with families what the girls decided on. Make sure your troop financial information is available to everybody. Don't wait for somebody to ask you because usually by then it's too late. There's already been questions. So just avoid all that by being proactive and transparent with everything that's going on with the troop. That creates a positive environment. And then you want to also create opportunities for input and sharing. It's a way of communicating both ways. Keep in mind that this is an important part of the positive environment. One idea is you may want to assign a parent or a volunteer or a co-leader to be kind of your welcome host so that whenever there's a new parent that comes on board in your troop, they could take the time to mentor them, to show them the ropes, so to speak. I remember schools doing this way back in the day. They would assign a buddy, and then you would, go throughout that day with your buddy, and they would show you around. So it's the same concept for the troop. So a couple of ideas to allow your troops space for input and sharing both ways are, for example, a welcome wall. You don't have to dedicate any time out of your troop meeting, but maybe you have a place where girls can display a family collage that they did with their parents, maybe on a poster board. And then you could invite all the families to post that on that wall or that billboard. And it gives us an idea of where they come from, how their family is comprised, and it's a sense of pride again for the girl, and it creates a sense of belonging. So you could do something like a welcome wall. Another idea is perhaps a game night. So maybe you organize a board game night for families to play in teams or, on their own. They could rotate. You could set time so it doesn't go on forever and ever. This can help your parents get to know each other, get to start feeling more comfortable in a fun, low risk setting. Another thing that you could consider is a career and job show and tell. So introduce your Girl Scouts to lots of different careers and jobs. You can ask parents to take turns talking to the girls about what they do. They should, they're going to be experts at what they do in their job, so it gives them that confidence to speak in front of the group. And you can do a show and tell based off of that. You could also maybe schedule a family sport event. So on a weekend, get together, play, whatever sport they'd like, maybe have a potluck. So there is space to do that in Girl Scouting, definitely. And then the last idea is to have a Saturday Success Academy. I thought this was a really good idea, especially for high school girls. A lot of times we see them no longer interested in Girl Scouts because they have so much other stuff going on, so much studying, they're preparing for college. So there's no reason why we couldn't incorporate that into what we do in scouting. So maybe you have a parent who's a teacher or who would be interested in, tutoring the girls so that you spend some time during your troop meetings doing that, focusing on that. I know of a troop personally who took this approach and it's proved very successful so that the girls spent half of their meeting time on Girl Scout topics and the other half was on receiving any additional help or information to prepare them for graduation. So a couple of ideas, there's many more, but I thought these were good and I wanted to pass them on. So we're moving on to step number 7, to engage your parents in your troop. And step number 7 is to communicate. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I put this on here, communication is such a big topic that I didn't know where to start at first. And I want to be brief, so I divided it up into certain questions that we want to ask ourselves. Communication is, of course, very important. We could do a whole workshop on communication alone. Every year when we survey volunteers, communication is something that always comes up. Either it's not enough, it's too much, or it's too late. So, and that's okay. I mean, communication is always going to come up. We know that. I know that. But we always want to mitigate and minimize that as much as we can, right? And improve it. So, to be brief, I'm going to highlight some things to keep in mind to improve communication, specifically between you and your parents. So, first, we want to ask ourselves, who is going to be doing the communicating? I know that we often overlook this, and assume that it's going to be the troop leader, right? But it's really for the troop to decide. You could have a volunteer do this. You could have a parent or a co-leader do this. It would just have to be someone that's reliable, that's consistent, and that can coordinate with you to send everything out. Maybe you have one person dedicated to sending emails, and maybe you have somebody else dedicated to posting on the Facebook group, which we're going to talk about later. So figure out who's going to be doing the communicating. We're also going to talk about what we communicate. So make sure that whatever we communicate is relevant to parents. How does this apply to them is a good question that we can ask. They definitely need to know, for example, when it's time to pick up cookies and where. They may not need to know when the Girl Scout shop received the latest merchandise. So that's maybe an overkill. So always ask yourself, why do parents need to know this? How does this benefit them? You also want to be timely with your communication. Nothing gets parents, or really anybody, as upset as when something is communicated late. So a classic example is if we're sending information to parents about an event, then we want to make sure that we send that well in advance of the registration deadline, right? Same applies for us here at council, for service units. We want to be timely and give them enough time. We also want to be consistent. We should attempt regular communication or contact with all parents, whether they're involved or not. Your troop can determine how and how often to do that. Does that mean a phone call every month? Does that mean an email every week, monthly? I mean, that's for you all to decide, but it does have to be consistent so that they're never wondering what's going on. You also want to make sure that your communication is two ways, and we talked about this kind of already. Always give parents the space to give you feedback, suggestions, and input. It can be done verbally, surveys, for example, or it can be done in writing on a comment card, maybe at your meeting. It can be directly with their names, or it could be anonymously. When speaking personally with parents, you could ask open-ended questions like, what changes have you noticed in your daughter since you guys joined the troop? Maybe before parents leave the meeting, you could ask them, how everything is going with their daughter. Ask them if they'd like to volunteer for this or for that, and ask them if they have any suggestions. I especially like to do this when I meet volunteers that come from other councils. I like that input. I like to get their feedback. So you all may have parents who had their daughter in a different troop or a different council. So it's a way of getting that two-way information that's very important. All right. So step number 7 to engage parents is communication. We talked about who needs to be doing the communicating, what we're going to be communicating. Very important is how we communicate. So there's a lot of things that go to this. I'm just going to put a couple of tips in here. So how we communicate. We want to keep it simple. Remember, assume our parents know very little to nothing about Girl Scouting, especially early in the troop year. We want to avoid Girl Scout jargon. We may know what an M&M or GSLE or a journey is, but they probably don't. Girl Scouting has been around for over 100 years. There's a lots of terms and traditions that have been passed during that time. We don't want to scare someone away or intimidate them because they don't know that. That's not required. Girl Scouting is for everybody. So make it simple. Keep it brief too, when possible, right? We know in some cases that may not be, but overall, try to keep it brief. As I've said before, there is such a thing as communication overload or overkill. Keeping your communication consistent and brief will help. Maybe you send one weekly email to everyone as opposed to 5 emails a day. Maybe you send one email with information a month and then you send reminders via text or Facebook. So kind of figure that out for you all. Um, it's pretty. We'll talk about email and texting and all of that here in a little bit. So also keep it positive. No matter what you're communicating, keep to the rule that you want to start with a thank you and end with a positive note. We call that the sandwich approach. It's very important. It really helps. I do this every day, every email, and I have always found that you can always, no matter what, start with a thank you and end on a positive note. There's a way to do that and still be assertive and clear when we need to. So keep it positive. Another good tip in how to communicate with parents is to use I statements. This comes straight from Volunteer Essentials, which is a GSUSA resource. It's a publication that we have on our website. But they talk about using I statements instead of you statements. When we tell somebody, or parent in this case, your daughter isn't being responsible, she's not bringing her book, or you're not, you know, picking up your daughter on time. The fact, just by using the word you automatically puts them defensive in a defensive stance, and then it's going to be very hard to communicate thereafter. So here are a couple examples of what a parent. So let me go over one, for example. So the first one, let's say that you have a parent that's uninvolved and asks how she can help, but seems to have no idea of how to follow through or take leadership of even the smallest activity. So if you have a parent, for example, in that situation, um, GSUSA recommends that you could say something like, I need your help. Here are some written guidelines on how to prepare for a camping trip. Take some time, look over it, and then we can talk later. So that's just an example where instead of saying you say you use I, and it develops a more two-way communication and relationship with the parent. So that's a pretty good tip. I use that all the time too. And then, of course, the wording that we talked about earlier. The troop belongs to the girls. We as adults are here to help them. Keep that in mind when you're communicating with parents. All right, so the last slide on communication has to do with particular ways of communicating. So there's a lots of ways we could communicate, right? Especially nowadays. So we're going to go over some different ways briefly, but it's really up to each troop to determine what works best for you. I'm sure it's probably going to be a combination of these, a different combination for every troop. So first, I wanted to break these up in categories. So I have low tech, mid tech, and high tech. So there are low tech ways of communicating, for example, a newsletter or a flyer or a handout. And these are things that could be done and then physically handed or emailed, either or both. Um, it's low tech now. The newsletter, you there's applications out there like Publisher and even Word, where you have templates that you can just plug in what you want to say, what pictures you want to put on, and then you have that template every time you want to use it. You don't have to start from scratch. So you want to start with the one page, keep it simple. There's pre-designed templates. Don't forget that older girls can help do this also. And it's something that you would physically hand perhaps at your troop meeting. So that's a low-tech way of communicating. Um, I've seen it done monthly, twice a year, so it's really up to you guys. And then phone calls, of course, is a low-tech way of communicating. Don't rule this out as a method to encourage deeper parental involvement in your troop. You should definitely call parents, for example, when they're repeatedly not picking up their daughter on time. But saying that, you can also call parents just as a polite and a considerate way to thank them or give their daughter some praise for something she did during the troop meeting. Parents love that. So maybe one girl was really good at a meeting, and she shared an experience or a snack or something that she had with others out of her own initiative, then we could call parents very briefly and talk to them about that and praise them, and it helps with the relationship, and it's great. It's great. Parents love it. So don't underestimate the value and return of the phone call. Then we have mid-tech communication methods. Email. Although certainly not all parents have access to email, email is the most common use for the internet by adults today. This may be a great way to send announcements and reminders to parents. So like I said, maybe you do a newsletter every month or whatever the case is, but in between that time, you send announcements and reminders via email. It's also a good way to keep a permanent record. And because emails are permanent, we want to be very careful with how they're written, worded, and above all, be positive. Texting is another more and more popular mid-tech way of communicating. There's lots of applications out there to help communicate via text. They're safe. You can have different privacy settings. You can have information verified, so you know that those are your parents' phone numbers. So they're really great. The common ones that I hear being used the most is Remind Me, which is used a lot for schools and students. A teacher would usually set up a classroom group, and then all students in that classroom could receive text from them through that. You could do the same thing for your troop. And then Group Me is another one. There's a bunch of them out there. So if you're interested, look into those, see what works for you and your troop. However, with email and texting, I just want to remind us that we want to avoid overkill. The more email and text that are sent out, the less attention they will get. Anybody, including myself, who subscribes to for example, Subway or the Redbox through text, we know that because we get so many texts, so many emails, the less attention we place on them. So just keep that in mind. There are high-tech ways of communicating also. So the first one is social media. There's tons of social media platforms out there. The most common one is Facebook, but you have Instagram, YouTube. They're free, they're relatively easy to create, and they can be set for members only and have different privacy settings. So that's up to you and your troop to figure out. The use of a page or a Facebook group or page is intended for communication as far as this session today for adults in your troop, not the girls. Make sure that you discuss with parents and that they're aware that you're going to be using this. If you need any help with any of that, feel free and contact us. Some troops I have seen have also set up a troop website. There are some platforms where you can set that up completely free. So creating a website for your troop is a high-tech way of communicating. You could put the newsletter, you can put updates, you can put pictures, you could do all of that there. Keep in mind, it does require some maintenance. So who's going to be updating that? Who's going to keep track of it? Who's going to stay on top of it? There's also some guidelines that we want to make sure that we're following from GSUSA, and those are in our Volunteer Essentials handbook, which you can find on our website. So as you can see, there is no shortage of ways to communicate with your troop. It's really up to you and your troop to see what works best for them. All right, moving along, we're going to step number 8 on helping with parental engagement is to empower your parents. Empowered parents translate into engaged parents. So some ways to empower parents is to educate them, of course. Maybe do a 5-minute presentation for parents on World Thinking Day, on the history of Girl Scouting, on how the service unit structure works, and how we're governed by volunteers and run by volunteers. So those are educational types of conversations that will help empower parents. Lead them to resources, as we talked about earlier. Refer them to the website, to the Facebook group, to our Flickr account where they could see pictures from Girl Scouts across our council. And of course, to trainings. So lead them to resources and they will become empowered. Invite them to service unit meetings if they are interested. They're not secret meetings. They are not closed meetings. They're public meetings. So if you have a particular volunteer or parent that's really interested in helping more or in the governance of our organization, then that would be a good invite to make to that parent and take them or have them. You could also have a parent who wants to help the troop but doesn't want to work directly with the girls or handle money or deal with cookies, but maybe she has or he has some time to attend the service unit meetings and take notes on behalf of the troop. That's another way of empowering them as well. And of course, you could encourage them to attend training, like we mentioned. The more the merrier, it only helps. So the more empowered and the higher sense of belonging that they will have, the more engaged they will be with the troop. Here's a quote from another troop leader. Keep an open door policy for parents who wish to attend the troop meetings. Encourage them to attend or call you to get updates on what their daughter is doing in the troop. When parents attend meetings, be clear about your behavior expectations, what they are of them at the meetings, and give parents a duty they are interested in helping. So it's another tip that kind of ties into the empowerment. Tip number 9 is to recognize your parents. There is great value in empowering parents. There's also great value in recognizing them. So we want to always be aware of that. Everybody likes to be recognized. There's, in fact, an OWL that we did back in 2015, which is all about volunteer recognition. So you can refer to that for more ideas. I'm going to keep this one brief and say that when you recognize your parents, you want to do it well. That means, among other things, that we live our Girl Scout motto of being prepared. We plan how we want to recognize them. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be long. It could be simple thank yous, could be notes, post-it notes. I mean, anything that would thank and recognize your parents. But we want to avoid doing last minute certificates, because that shows them that we're not being prepared. You also want to do it often, so that means not waiting until that time of the year for official recognitions. Instead, create a culture of ongoing recognition in various and diverse ways. Simple acknowledgments, greeting cards, thank yous, all of that can be done anytime by anyone. So we want to do it often. We also want to make it meaningful. So that means that you could do some recognition publicly in front of the troop. You could do it privately. Maybe I reach out to one parent in particular and really thank them for something. And you could definitely include the troop. So I've seen where some troops will have the girls clap one time and then thank somebody. And they go through that list. So it's fun. It involves the troop. The girls like it. They're part of it. So we want to make it meaningful, whether they engaged and helped for 4 hours or 4 years. It makes a world of difference. You also, when you make it meaningful, want to be specific. So there's a world of difference between giving a thank you note to somebody and saying, thanks for all of your help with the troop, as opposed to saying, you know what, I really want to take some time and thank you. The other day, we didn't have enough scissors to finish our craft, and I know that you went out of your way to stop at the store and go get some so that the girls could finish. I appreciate that. So the more specific you are, the more meaningful the recognition is. So recognition goes a long way to parent engagement. And our last tip on engaging parents is to make it regular. So as I mentioned earlier, there is no start or stop to parental engagement. It's always going. It's like a machine that never stops, which is why I have this picture here with gears. There's no magic, no secret trick. It's about connecting with your parents to build those relationships, about engaging them throughout, and then sustaining that engagement. It takes patience. New parents will always come into your troop, others will leave. We will need to connect with them as well. So it's never over, but we want to make sure to keep it regular. And in the end, if we do, we know that a successful Girl Scout troop requires strong parent or guardian participation. So those are our 10 tips for engaging parents in your troop. We hope that it helped. We hope that you got some tips from it, perhaps some things that you have not tried before, perhaps some reminders of things that we want to do. So thank you so much for owling with us today. Again, all of our owls are recorded and put on our YouTube account, and you can reach our YouTube account by going to our website, which is here on your screen. And we hope that you'll take advantage of future owls in the future. Thank you so much.